Hi, welcome to Talking Books and Stuff, the program that talks all about books and writing and stuff. Here's your host, Dennis Rimmer.
Welcome back. Once again, it is Talking Books and Writing and Stuff. I'm your genial host, Dennis Rimmer, and today a bit of a departure, but not much, talking with Ruth Adams from Vancouver Island. She has a blog and she photographs flowers and writes a blog, but we'll get into that in a moment. But before we do that, Ruth, I understand you were in broadcasting for many a year and you actually went to BCIT, is that right?
I did, and I noticed that you did too. I was a newscaster for many, many years. I started after graduating from electronic journalism, which is what they called it back in the day, at BCIT, and worked in Chilliwack and Vancouver, and I probably did it for about 12 years. It was wonderful experience, and it certainly helped in writing. I find that having to write newscasts every half hour or hour at the most really prepares you for any kind of writing. And it certainly prepares you for being brief and succinct.
Exactly. And I know what you're talking about because my first job out of BCIT was at CFAX in Victoria. I started as an operator and then was in the copy department, writing department. And every day I had to write those 10-second PSA things.
Yeah.
So, yes, when you have to put a page and a half of information into 10 seconds or 15, then, you learn on the job, as it were, the hard way, that every word counts and you got to make every word count and make it as quick and informative as you can. So what year were you at BCIT? What years?
I started in 1974 and graduated in 1976. In those days, it was a 2-year program. Yep. And I went to BCIT initially because my father had been the vice principal. The title is now vice president. And I grew up just knowing I was going to go there. He wanted me to be a mining engineer like him because he thought that I could travel the world and, the world would be mine. But I couldn't see myself working in isolated communities, doing any kind of mining, and we had a tour of BCIT one day, and as soon as I stepped into the studios, I thought, this is for me. I am going to work in this industry. And I initially was going to be work in educational television, and did a stint in radio and never left. That was it.
Yeah,
so,
I know what you mean. So I graduated in '69. So my fellow grads included Brian Atkinson and John Ansell. So you probably know those two names.
Oh yeah,
yeah, and lots of it. Lundy Sanderson, was he still there when you were there?
He was my department head.
Right. Yep. And then Brian kind of took over a while later. And let's see, Rick Stewart was a guy I worked with at CFUN, and Peter Mailing, a couple of guys like that. Might have been around your time, but maybe a bit before that, so I don't know.
A little before, but I did know many of them, and certainly know the names of every man that you've mentioned.
Yep. And let's see, I don't know what happened to most of them, but Brian and I still keep in touch. And that's about it, really. I don't know too many people that stayed in broadcasting after the first couple of years when they found out what it was really like.
It never leaves you, though. It never leaves you.
That's right.
Getting back into writing and things like that, the broadcast experience stays with you forever. You really learn so much on the job. I think it's a fantastic field for anyone to get into, even if it's only for a few years. It teaches you so much about communications and I know a little bit about a lot of things,
right. Yes.
but I don't know a heck of a lot about one thing, but I do know a little bit about a lot of things, and that has helped me in everything I've done. It's helped in the writing. It's helped. I ran an Airbnb for a number of years in Toronto, and knowing a little bit about a lot of things helps in communicating with guests arriving from all over the world. I was able to relate to them on some level instantly, and it made all the difference.
Exactly, and I wanted to get into it because I didn't want to work for a living, so there you go. We're talking with Ruth Adams, and she has a blog and takes pictures of roses and things like that. We'll get to that in a moment. It's a Widow's Endorphin. But first of all, just a little bit more about your background. So you grew up in the Burnaby, Vancouver area, did you, or no?
Well, I did. I was born in northern Quebec. I was born in Rouyn-Noranda. My mother is French-Canadian, or was. And as I say, my father was a mining engineer at that time. And so I was born in northern Quebec. One of my sisters was also born there. My brother was born in a tiny, tiny little place called Tilt Cove, Newfoundland. And the current population is 4. And my youngest sister was born at home, or was to be born at home, but ended up being born in the hospital in Grand Forks, BC. And by the time I was 4, I had traveled the country many, many times, and finally settled in Vancouver and then Burnaby. So I grew up in Burnaby after all that traveling. My parents thought that the traveling was probably unsettling for young children, and they wanted to give us a sense of stability. So we moved to Burnaby, and that's where we stayed.
And did you go to Burnaby North?
And I did go to Burnaby North, and Michael Bublé's dad, Lou, had his locker right across the hall from mine.
What?
Yeah.
His dad.
His dad. I know. When I listen to Michael Bublé, I have to be careful not to get too overwrought, because it's like, after all, he's practically, he's like, he could be a nephew.
Exactly. Well, my dad went to Burnaby North. That was in the late 30s, and then he dropped out and then finished his high school years later, which I was very proud of him for doing that.
Yes,
and
yes.
I went, when I was going to BCIT, the Guess Who did a show at Burnaby North. And
oh my gosh.
The only way I could get an interview with them was to arrange transportation from them after the show back to the Sands Hotel in the West End. So,
oh my gosh.
So there's 4 of them jammed into the back of my friend's mother's car. And I've talked to Randy Bachman a couple of times, and he still remembers that, or so he says.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Yeah.
So that brings us to your radio career. You were at CKWX, I take it.
Yes, I was. And CKWX was a country music station. And while I was there, the general manager, or the manager, Tom Peacock, started C-Jazz. That was a dream of his, to have a jazz station in Vancouver. And C-Jazz was the FM station downstairs, and CKWX was country music upstairs, and I did news and interviews for both stations. So that was very, very different demographics.
Exactly.
But and a lot of fun.
I really liked C-Jazz when it was on, and you guys were on Burrard Street, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I was at C-Fun 76 to 79, and then 82 to 86. So there you go. Our connections are everywhere.
By 1986, I had left CKWX and had gone over to CKNW for the Expo 86 coverage. And that was another dream of mine, to work. I had seen Expo 67 in Montreal and really, really wanted to. When I knew that Vancouver was getting Expo 86, I wanted to work there. I would have done anything for it. So it was a dream job for me to work there.
Yes, and I know, because I got to go there a lot too with my CFUN News Pass. Also, the first time I ever used a cell phone was when they opened SkyTrain.
Oh my gosh!
And this thing was the size of a suitcase, right? So
yes,
it's gigantic. But I thought, oh, cell phones, that's great. So anyway, enough of the chitter-chatter about the old days, and you were worried you wouldn't have enough to talk about, and we're already... we're talking with Ruth Adams, and really the seriousness here is about a blog spot you have, and it's called Widow's Endorphin. So maybe you could please explain that title for us.
My late husband, died of liver cancer. He had, he died of liver cancer, and I had been taking care of my mother for more than 2 decades by that point. She had had massive strokes and was bedridden. She was on a feeding tube. I was her full-time caregiver for decades. And when my husband died, I really didn't know what I was going to do. I somehow had to be able to take care of her and stay home because she needed round-the-clock care. And I was really trying to find my way. And part of my way was doing things that I knew I could do, because I'd been out of the workforce for many, many years by this time. So I thought, well, maybe I could do some photography and writing and see where that goes. I had heard that people can make money with a blog. So I thought, okay, I'll write and post photographs and promote. I had been selling greeting cards, and I specialize in floral photography. So I started. That was back in January of 2015. My husband had died in 2014. So January 2015, I had 2 blog posts, and as of this morning, that has risen to, I've had almost 500 blog posts and 51,020 viewers. And by that I mean that someone has opened the page up and read something, and then someone else has, and someone else has, for a total of 51,020 views over that period of time. So that's kind of fun. When I started out, I was excited about having 1 view. Oh, look, I got somebody who read it.
Right. And are you making a bit of money on this without getting too
Not
personal?
A dime. Not a dime.
Oh, sounds like my podcast.
With Blogspot, you have to. I've made about $10, a little more than $10, but the way it works, you have to make $100 before they release it to you. Oh. So maybe when I'm like 90 years old, I might be able to cash in. So no, I have not made money on that, but I have made money on another project that's related to it and also carries the Widow's Endorphins name, and that's a clothing line also based on the photography, and it's a clothing line that I promote on the blog. I take a photograph, and through the magic of a computer platform, have that photograph embedded into fabric, which is then cut out into dresses and T-shirts and peignoirs and kimonos and everything else. So they're really quite beautiful, and they wear phenomenally well. So I have made some money on that.
Now, this must keep you quite busy.
It has kept me busy. At one point, I was taking care of my mom, running an Airbnb, writing blog posts, and designing the clothing. So that was probably the busiest I've been in a long time. And I went at that pace for about 2 years. And since then, life has kind of slowed. My mother passed away 3 years ago. I've moved away from Toronto back in November, and with that ended the Airbnb, and moved to Vancouver, and then a longtime friend of mine, a mutual friend, Cam, his wife passed away recently, and we found ourselves very much in love with one another. And so I moved here in May, and I live in paradise, and I am absolutely in bliss right now. The last blog post I wrote seems like eons ago, but it was I titled it "Honeymooning for Beginners."
Yes,
and it was really all about just my new life. We now consider ourselves almost a married couple, and it's really very beautiful. It's everything that I could have wished for has come true.
Great. I'm glad to hear that. And that is Widow's Endorphin. Now, it's not a widow's endorphin, but it's a singular possessive widows. Why isn't it widows with a plural? Is it just... Well,
yeah, I wrote it initially. It was my blog for me. It was written as a way to work through grief. I wanted it to be an uplifting blog. I didn't want it to be something that people would weep over, although people do cry. It was important that I be able to have it as a means of expressing whatever I was going through, and also showcase flowers. The endorphins are natural stress and pain relievers. And for me, flowers and floral photography are that. So widows, my endorphins, my flowers and floral photography. That's basically what it is. And yeah.
So it's your personal way of working through all that trauma you've gone through in the last few years. And the writing, of course, has a lot to do with it. By the way, this is Ruth Adams with us today on Talking Books and Writing and Stuff. So we're talking about writing, photography, and stuff. How do we find your blogs and your pictures?
It's called Widow's Endorphins. So all lowercase, .blogspot.com.
Widow's Endorphin or Widow's
Endorphins. Widows. Yes. Widow's Endorphins. There's no apostrophe in the URL.
Right.
So it's WIDOWSENDORPHINS.blogspot.com.
Perfect. And while we're on the subject of books and writing, do you have any favorite books you've read over the years?
I loved Gone with the Wind, and I really loved City of Joy. I loved City of Joy because on almost every single page, I learned something new.
City of Joy, was that Amy Tam?
I'm sorry?
The writer of City of Joy was whom?
I can't even remember. I thought it was written by two people, actually.
Oh, okay.
but it was about life in Calcutta. And it was turned into a movie with Patrick Swayze, but the movie was just a tiny fraction of what happened in the book. The book had been written, I believe, by journalists, and it had a very dramatic yet journalistic style to it. And that's what I mean. There was so much information. I learned so much. I really, really liked that book a lot. The blog writing that I do, I like to keep things short. I like to have a story that, or a blog post that can be read on a coffee break, that can be read between subway stops, maybe 2 or 3 subway stops, and then you're finished. I never intended the blog to be pages and pages long with every post. And the photographs are always mine. And almost always macro photos of roses or peonies or whatever flower happens to be in bloom.
That's wonderful. And maybe you can just once more give us that site.
It's Widows Endorphins. Endorphins being natural pain and stress relievers.
Right.
And it's widows as in someone who has lost a husband, not windows that need washing.
Okay, got it. Thank you very much for your time today, and good luck and best wishes for your new life.
Thank you. Thank you. It's certainly creating a little bit of an issue with the blog, considering it's called Widows Endorphins. Where do I go from here? I certainly haven't felt I'm on a honeymoon, excuse me. I sure don't feel like working. I don't feel like writing anything. And anything I could write about, do you really want me to talk about it? So that's kind of where I'm at. Where am I going from here?
Right.
I've already surpassed 50,000 views. That was a big goal. So I've met that goal, and you're catching me at a real crossroads in my writing life. What am I going to do next? How is this going to move forward, or is it coming to an end?
Well, we'll see. Maybe we'll check back in a year or so and see how things are developing, to use a photographic pun. Okay. Well, thank Ruth Adams. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Dennis. I've enjoyed this.
Thank you for visiting with us today. This is Talking Books and Stuff with Dennis Rimmer. Contact him at dennis@talkingbooks.tk. Thank you, and may all the good news be yours. Oh, and don't forget to check out his book, The Great Canadian Notebook, available across Canada and at amazon.ca.